Today we're going to be looking at making up a multi-signal mount. That'll be the kit that you will need with all the parts inside. You will need a set of instructions, very important, and you will need 4 Hobby King HK15178 servos. The first thing is to unpack all the parts and lay them all out. All the screws, separate them into different sizes. You will need a couple of screwdrivers, a pair of side cutters, and you will need a drill with a 1.8mm drill in the chuck. Also make sure to lay out these 4 spaces exactly like this. There's a picture in the instructions on how to do that. Very important to make sure all the holes are, the tapped holes are all at the top, and that the bars are laid exactly in that order. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sort out the motors. You need to take out this particular horn from the pack, and then you need to drill the second hole from the edge out to 1.8mm. Now this is probably not the best way to do it, but it's only plastic. Alright, so I've drilled out the second hole to 1.8mm. Try not to drill it bigger than that. If you do, the screws could be loose and you might have to put a drop of super glue in to fix that. The next thing you need to do is to cut that off on the third hole. A pair of side cutters does that job very nicely. And then you need to put the screws in from this side, so it's not the flat side, but the bottom side. And on 2 of them, you'll need to screw in, get this to start. On 2 of them you will need to put in a M2x8 screw, and on 2 of them an M2x6 screw. Right, so it looks like that's nice and tight. Like I said, if your hole is slightly big, just put a drop of super glue on there, make sure it's standing straight, and leave it to sit. Or alternatively, you can run a nut on there if you want to, but yeah, that's entirely up to you. But if you drill the hole at 1.8, even 1.5, you should be able to screw the screw in like that, so it's all good together. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to take our little servo tester. I'm just going to move these things out of the way. A little servo tester, fire it up, and plug the servo on there, and then center it with the center pin on there. Right, now we need to take the little unit we've just made, and we need to put them on in that direction so that the pin is exactly pointing towards the Hobby King logo there, and just run that little screw all the way up into there. So we need to make up 4 of these, 2 with an M2x6 pin and 2 with an M2x8 pin. That's just slightly longer. Excellent. Right, now we can, all the servos are centered. We can now begin to assemble the unit itself. The first thing you're going to need is the main frame, and that's what we refer to as the top, because that's the side that's going to go to the baseboard of the layout, so we call that the top of the layout of the unit, and that is the main frame. All these things are pre-folded, so you don't. So now we take the main frame and we take the top bar, which has a T marked on it, should do, but it's the one with the two holes very close together on the left hand side, and that fits over the top frame there, and you put it together with the M2x3 screws. Now what I tend to do with these is to put two screws in diagonally opposed, one on each side, and then we'll tighten everything up at a later stage. Okay, so that is the top. Now we need unit number 2, and it goes through the bottom hole there in that what's name. Now I need a servo with a 6mm pin on it, and that needs to go in there. But before we put that in, make sure that make sure that that slot is on the pin. I can turn it over, and now with a couple of the M2x6 screws, should have 10 of these altogether. 2 we've used for the pins. Should probably have said this is not something that you can put together in 5 minutes. It takes a little bit of time, but it's a very nice unit once it's put together. I'm putting both screws in. In actual fact, you could put one screw in and come back to it at a later stage and put the second screw in. Okay, so that is the pin on there. Right. The next slider is slider number 3. So we take slider number 3, and that goes into hole number 3, which is this bottom one here. So the 2 bottom ones going first, and we take another short. Now this is where it gets tricky. You've got that servo sitting that way, the next servo goes in the opposite direction, and that goes in, and again it locks into the second unit there. Turn it over, put some screws in, well, it's always good to make up the servos first before you start, because then you're not getting caught up with not having the right screws, or not having the servo down when you need to put it in. Right, that's number 2 in, and it's all locked on nicely. Now we need to put we need to fit slider number 1, which is this one, and that goes in to that slot there. And now we have a motor with a longer pin, and again we swap it around, so it'll be that way around. And there's the bar. That's why nothing wanted to fit. Right, so that one needs to clock onto there, and that should be all good to go. Bring it back a bit. Right, let's have that bottom frame again. Now I can, the holes are always to the top. Oh dear, don't be so difficult. Right, and then that one goes in there, and this one goes in there. Just bring that back a bit. So they're all locked in now, they're all in place. And we can now put this together. I combine the holes. One on that side. Opposing one on this side, and I can even test that to make sure that one's working all right. The others all feel nice and loose. This one's a bit tight. Where's the second one, third one, that one there. Right, we're doing splendidly. Now the last pin is this one. That goes through there like that. And again, we swap the motor around. So it's on this way around. Make sure that it's locating in that slot there, and put some screws in. And there we go, all 4 units are in place. Now, it's a good idea now to test the various servos if you want to. Make sure they're all operating nice and freely. There's a certain limited movement on these units because of the constraints of the machines, but there we go. So that's all done. Everything's all happening nicely, so we can then take the remaining screws, which are all over my table now, and we can put them in to make sure it's all locked up tight. Like most things I design, it's all totally over-engineered. Seem to have mislaid a couple of screws there. Where did I put them? Oh, here they are. Here they were somewhere. And the other one goes in there. So that's the main unit complete. Now in this little packet here you will find 4 little clips, 4 M2x4 screws, and 4 countersink screws. So I've opened the packet here, got all those bits here. The M2x4s go through these little plastic goodies, and you put one on each of the bars there. I guess one could do this before assembly, might make life a bit easier. Haven't thought about that. Or thumbs today. There we go. They have a little ridge on them so that they stand straight, and your actuator wire for your signal will be clamped in that space. Oh dearie me. And one more to go. I'm all thumbs today. Right, that's job done. Now you have this plate, this is the top plate which goes onto the top of the layout probably to hold the whole thing together. Now you can, using these little countersink screws, you can put that directly onto the plate like that, but I guess for most people they want to get access to that as well. So you have these little standoffs which you can just turn into those 4 screw holes, and that will then stand it away 12mm from the baseboard, from the top of the baseboard, and then this plate goes over. Make sure that the slot is over the connectors there. And again, we have these little fiddly screws. These are a bit easier to put in because you can it's a lot easier when you haven't got to do this underneath the camera, I must be honest. But yeah, just so you can see what I'm doing. Quite useful. Oh, for heaven's sake. And that as they say in the classics, is that. Job done, unit built, all ready to go. And you can now erect your signal, your gantry directly onto that plate. All the connections in there, make sure they're all operating correctly, and then you can use the template on our website to cut a slot in your baseboard. You can drop the whole 9 yards right through. 2 screws in there with these screws will hold the whole thing to the layout. I hope that has been useful, and thank you so much for watching. This is Dave. Bye.